was Suge Knight warning how dangerous prison can be, and now it's like he predicted his own fate. The Death Row founder was just stabbed in a violent prison attack, and sources say it's tied to the secrets he's been exposing. What was he trying to reveal, and who tried to shut him up? Let's get into it. The attack that shocked hip-hop. Suge Knight is one of the most talked about figures in hip-hop history, but on one fateful night in June, he became just another inmate. It happened fast. One source said the lights in C Block were already out when, for reasons no one could explain, an inmate managed to access Suge's cell and launched a violent attack. To really understand what happened that night in prison, you need to understand who Suge Knight was, not just to hip-hop, but to the entire underground world of American entertainment. He wasn't some small-time hustler who stumbled into a record deal. Suge Knight was hip-hop's boogeyman, the one everyone feared, even at the top. Suge Knight was born and raised in Compton. He started out as a football player, then moved into street work, acting as muscle for hire around LA. But it was in the early 90s that he made his real mark, after teaming up with Dr. Dre, who had just left Eazy-E's Ruthless Records. Suge co-founded Death Row Records. What started as a small label quickly became the center of the West Coast rap scene. And Suge didn't build it by playing nice. Death Row wasn't just a label, it was a kingdom, and Suge was the one in charge. By 1994, Death Row was pulling in over $100 million a year. The label was on top of the charts with artists like Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Nate Dogg, and Dogg Pound. It was like the all-star team of West Coast hip-hop, but behind the success was violence. Former insiders say Suge ruled through fear and control. There were constant stories of threats, fights, and intimidation. One of the most infamous stories, Suge allegedly dangled Vanilla Ice over a hotel balcony during a money dispute. He was also known for showing up at clubs with a crew of 15 or more guys, shutting things down and making examples out of anyone who stepped out of line. But by the mid-2000s, Death Row was bankrupt and Suge's criminal cases were piling up. Assault charges, civil suits, parole violations, and finally the 2015 hit-and-run incident during the filming of Straight Outta Compton, where Suge ran over two men in his truck, killing one. That case earned him 28 years at Donovan, a sentence most assumed would finally quiet the Death Row boss for good. They were wrong. Even from behind bars, Suge wasn't done talking, and it was one phone call that lit the fuse for everything that followed. It was January 2024 when Suge Knight, sitting inside R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility, picked up a prison payphone and made a collect call that would set the entire hip-hop industry ablaze. The platform, the PBD podcast. Now, most inmates doing hard times stay silent. They avoid media. They don't stir old ghosts. But Suge was different. He understood one thing better than anyone else. In the world of hip-hop power politics, silence gets you buried. So Suge called in for nearly 2 hours. He unloaded decades of unfiltered, unapologetic, and downright dangerous allegations. And it wasn't random gossip. He named names, pulled receipts, and dared anyone to stop him. It started subtly with Suge reminiscing about Death Row in the old days. But then when the conversation shifted to the Diddy situation, he dropped the first bomb.
Number one was Clyde Davis. And you gotta understand one thing. If Death Row, when I started Death Row, you gotta remember one thing. I didn't have no co-founder, nobody else. I started that company on my own and grabbed Dr. Dre.
If you know anything about industry politics, you know the name Clyde Davis isn't mentioned lightly. One of the most powerful execs in American music, Clyde Davis has launched careers, buried scandals, and, as Suge alluded, picked who lives and who gets sacrificed. And if you thought that was the end of Suge's suicidal honesty, think again. Less than an hour later, he doubled down, accusing hip-hop's elite of conspiring to silence anyone who refuses to play by their rules. Or worse, according to Suge, even Diddy is in danger. Not because of what he's done, but because of what he knows.
He's definitely gonna be the black man that holds the bag. Because you gotta realize one thing. That boy's life is dangerous. His life isn't, and he's just not dangerous with it they said he was doing, but he's in danger. He knows too much.
That wasn't just some aging gangster running his mouth. That was a man who knew the secrets because he helped keep them.
He probably having a conversation right now with the higher-ups and everybody else to figure out how it's gonna work itself out, because he know all the secrets. And if he gets to run his mouth, it could be a bad look.
Suge was talking about Diddy, but what he didn't realize was that running his own mouth might land him in trouble too. And then it happened, and they did. It was just past 10:40 p.m. inside Cab Block Unit 5 at RJ, a Donovan Correctional Facility, a medium-security prison sitting on the outskirts of San Diego. The yard was locked down, lights were dim, the usual end-of-night shuffle, inmates securing contraband, guards running checks, cells shutting in sequence. But something was off. According to a leaked statement from an anonymous corrections officer quoted by Hip Hop Unfiltered, one cell door remained unlocked longer than usual. It belonged to inmate number D395 Marion Hugh Suge Knight. That door shouldn't have been open more than 30 seconds. It stayed open for 2.5 minutes. That don't happen by accident. It was in that window that an unidentified inmate, face covered, gloved hands, slipped inside. Witnesses in adjacent cells later told Vlog TV, "We heard a thud then too, then you could tell somebody got hit bad cause all you heard was the breathing after. No yelling, just that sound you make when your ribs go." Second witness claimed Suge's lifeline, the prison phone, was conveniently shut down for maintenance on C Block within minutes of the assault. And then nothing. The attacker disappeared back into the dark. The cameras, supposedly operational, caught only static on the feed between 10:38 p.m. and 10:46 p.m. One correction source later admitted to Hip Hop DX, "They ain't want to make it public. That would have been bad for business, bad for the feds, bad for everybody." And just like that, the king of death row lay beaten in his cell. Blood on the floor, ribs cracked, face cut, and the system moved fast. Within the hour, Suge was moved to the medical unit. 3 known death row affiliates in Donovan were transferred or placed in solitary. The Cab Block security log for that night was wiped. Phone calls to 2 external numbers were logged, then manually deleted by morning. An insider told Vlog TV, "Somebody pulled rank. That's why none of that hit the news cycle. They had 2 teams in place, one to hit, one to clean up." But the streets heard by sunrise. Messages shot through West Coast yards from Pelican Bay to Lancaster. "The big homie got touched. Shit's about to change." By now, it's no secret Suge Knight made more enemies than friends in his rise to power. But what most don't realize is how long some of those grudges have lasted and who still holds them today. Diddy, Clyde Davis, Jimmy Iovine, former death row enforcers turned confidential informants. Each had reason to fear what Suge might still know and what he might be willing to say, especially after that PBD podcast call.
Puppy that's me out there to them. Shit, they ain't tripping. But if you don't stop the cycle, it's gonna keep happening.
Suge wasn't just airing grievances, he was threatening to reveal exactly how deep the industry's ties to criminal networks, federal handlers, and money laundering operations really went. According to one longtime West Coast insider who spoke anonymously to Hip Hop DX, Suge ain't been relevant musically in years, but info-wise he's still sitting on murder cases, contracts, and dirty money moves going back to the Pac-In big days, and he's too reckless now to keep that quiet. And after that broadcast, no one could afford to let him keep talking. Within hours of the attack, gang politics inside Donovan shifted. OG blood sets, long loyal to death row fell silent. A top-tier _ shot caller from another yard unit was transferred overnight. No explanation, and by week's end, the name Suge Knight wasn't spoken publicly in Donovan. A code had been enforced. One inmate said, "When the bosses move in silence, you don't speak on it." And this was one of them moves. It would be easy to chalk all this up to prison politics or some old beef finally catching up. But once you connect the dots from that phone call to the attack to the sudden cover-up and media silence, the pattern is clear. This wasn't random. Suge had stirred the pot too much and the industry took notice because the podcast wasn't the only time he'd been running his mouth. For months, Suge had been dropping bombs, exposing names, and threatening to bring down some of hip-hop's biggest players. Suge Knight exposes hip-hop's biggest frauds. From his cell in the pen, Suge Knight been dropping bombs that's got the whole hip-hop game shook to its core. Through his podcast Collect Call with Suge Knight, launched in October 2023, this OG been systematically exposing what he claim are the real stories behind hip-hop's most legendary figures, painting a picture of betrayal, deception, and straight-up snake behavior that reach all the way to the top of the music industry food chain. Some of the most explosive revelations have centered on his former death row family, especially Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. Two cats Suge helped elevate from street-level artists to global icons with more money than they knew what to do with. But according to Suge, that success came at a cost: loyalty, truth, and ultimately the destruction of everything he built from the ground up. Still, no beef runs deeper or more dangerous than his war with Snoop Dogg. This one goes beyond industry politics. We're talking loyalty, snitching, and the murky truth behind some of hip-hop's darkest chapters.
Even when you speak on Snoop, people can say, well, are you picking on Snoop? Absolutely not. Snoop is picking on Snoop. Everybody says, Snoop, you had involvement in it. We're not trying to put you in prison. I don't want you to go to prison. Can't nobody put you in prison. You connected to those folks. And you Trump's little but why you just don't set the record straight?
Man, the frustration in Suge's voice when he talk about Snoop is real and it's deep. He ain't just accusing Snoop of lying about their shared history. He's straight up suggesting that Snoop and working with law enforcement and got connections that protect him from the consequences that done befallen everybody else in their circle. That phrase, "you connected to those folks," carries some heavy implications in the street code, suggesting that Snoop's success and freedom come at the cost of keeping it 100 with his original crew. The betrayal Knight feeling is real evident when he discussed how Snoop and others done rewritten the history of Death Row Records to minimize his role and pump up their own contributions.
What you did is the weirdest I ever met in my life. Naturally, I'm in jail. Naturally, I'm in prison. So when the corporation of the name Death Row, they didn't pay the fees to keep it going, you went and got the name and asked your boss.
Knight's revelations about Dr. Dre equally explosive and deeply personal. Their relationship, which once produced some of hip-hop's most iconic tracks, deteriorated into something way more complex and troubling.
True story. Dre came to me because I'm not going to go into the situation with them on about this. I said, well, something like that. It's like old Hollywood. You got to get married quickly. He wanted to marry this person. That person didn't want to. I can get this new person to marry them. One day, Dre came to me and said, I'm never going to cuss on albums again. I'm never going to talk about women again. And he told me that he wanted to be white.
These revelations paint a picture of Dr. Dre as somebody struggling with his identity and sexuality, turning to Knight for guidance during personal crisis. Knight's willingness to air out these intimate details demonstrate either a complete breakdown in their relationship or a calculated move to damage Dre's reputation. Either way, represent a level of personal betrayal that go way beyond typical business disputes.
So when every time we get there, the guard calls up. He said, easy up here for Dre. Let him up. He at the door. You know what's up there? He said, that's Dre. So he walks in the studio, we see me, we see a few people, we start talking. I said, man, he ain't coming, but I'm gonna talk to you about it. I showed him the pictures of all the artists I had on one piece and the three I had on another piece. I was like...
In Knight's version of events, he was being played by Dr. Dre, who was secretly working to destroy his former partner while pretending to maintain their friendship. The emotional impact of this betrayal on Eazy-E was devastating.
I seen one of the saddest things I ever seen in a man. I'm looking at Eazy, Eric, like, he said, I bought it car, you know, this form is one for me, he won't be nothing. And it's like he trying to hold back the tears because he don't want to be embarrassed like you seen him cry. Because he crying because he's scared or he crying because he hurt before another man.
But perhaps the most chilling part of Knight's Eazy-E story is what happened next. According to Knight, Dr. Dre was secretly planning violence against his former...
When Andre answered the phone, I'm talking to him. I said, he getting ready to come up here now. What you want done again? He was like, man, shoot that head, blow his head off, shoot him in the eye, take pictures of it. You don't got one of those things, you know, blah, 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 people phone shit, you know. Get one of those portable cameras and let me see it, I want to see it, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yo. This explosive allegation suggesting that Dr. Dre was actively planning to have Eazy-E murk complete with photographic evidence. If this real, this revelation fundamentally changed our understanding of the relationships within NWA and the circumstances surrounding Eazy-E's eventual death from AIDS-related complications. The current state of hip-hop, according to Knight, reflect the triumph of these corrupted systems over the authentic street culture that he helped bring to mainstream success. Knight's ongoing disputes with figures like Wack 100 and Reggie Wright Jr. continue to surface through social media, showing that his beefs extend way beyond the major celebrities to include former associates and industry figures who he believed betrayed him or misrepresented their roles in Death Row's success. The impact of these accusations extend way beyond personal relationships. If even a fraction of Knight's claims is true, they suggest that some of hip-hop's most celebrated figures built their careers on betrayals and compromises that fundamentally contradict the authentic image they cultivated. For fans and observers of hip-hop culture, Knight's podcast represent either a necessary accounting of past wrongs or a destructive campaign by somebody whose time done passed. But for all the shots Suge has been firing, from Dre to Diddy, from Clive Davis to Snoop, there's one story that still makes people nervous to even whisper about, one truth that could still get him touched and detained about royalties or record labels. It's about what really happened that night in Vegas when Tupac was gunned down in Suge Knight's car. Suge Knight's most deadly secret could get him touched. Of all the street wars, industry beefs, and explosive allegations that been swirling around Suge Knight throughout his reign in the game, ain't nothing carry more weight or potential deadly consequences than the persistent questions about his role in the death of Tupac Shakur. The official story is street legend by now. Tupac and Knight was leaving a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand when they got hit up in a drive-by shooting. Pac died from his injuries 6 days later while Knight survived with minor wounds. But Knight's own statements about that night, both past and present, contain contradictions and implications that fuel decades of conspiracy theories and accusations that could still get him touched either by the law or by people in the streets who want justice.
You know how crushed my mother would have been if I would have died? I could have. So when you get people who was not there, didn't know us, and say, I grabbed Tupac and used to shield, or this happened, how do you know these details, whoever you are, if you was not there?